The sky over Driftwood Hollow bled gold as the last church bell tolled. Dust swirled in lazy spirals, catching the light like ashes from some old fire that never quite died out. The townsfolk gathered beneath the steeple's long shadow, whispering behind lace gloves and worn Stetsons, eyes pulled toward the steps where two figures stood, the bride in white, the groom in gray. He stood with his hands clenched, jaw tight beneath a sunburned beard, eyes scanning the crowd instead of the woman at his side. His coat still smelled faintly of horses and gun smoke, though he'd bathed that morning in the cold creek just west of town. There was a rawness to him, not fresh, but old, rubbed down to the bone. His name had once meant something in this town, spoken with a touch of awe and a touch of fear. Now it passed through lips with caution, like someone remembering the edge of a blade. She stood beside him, poised but pale. Her hands didn't shake, but her smile had too much stillness to be real. Lace trailed from her sleeves like unraveling promises. She'd sewn that dress herself, every stitch a dream. And now she wore it like armor. The preacher cleared his throat, his voice a rasping drawl. "Do you take this woman?" The wind stirred hard, cutting through the chapel doors. Then came a sound like boots striking wood. Everyone turned. She stepped into the doorway, a woman no one had seen in Driftwood for nearly 6 years. Her hair was long black as storm cloud shadows, braided with bone beads and eagle feathers. Her face carried both beauty and battle scars. A small cut traced her jaw like a signature, and her eyes burned in the quiet way that meant danger. The bride's breath hitched. The townsfolk froze, and the groom's heart seemed to stop. No one spoke. Even the preacher paused, words crumbling into dust. She said nothing, just stood there, watching him, daring him. The silence swelled, heavy and thick. Then came the moment the whole town would talk about for years, how the groom turned, looked at the woman beside him, and then let his silence become an answer. He stepped away from the altar. Gasps swept the church like prairie fire. The bride flinched but didn't move, not even when her father rose from the front pew, hand twitching toward the revolver at his hip. She only watched the man she loved walk toward someone else, watched the future they'd built vanish one slow step at a time. He passed the pews, boots echoing hollow on the floorboards, and stopped in front of the woman in the doorway. Up close, he looked at her like a man who'd survived something terrible and wasn't sure if it had ended. She didn't smile, didn't soften. If anything, her eyes narrowed. "I thought you were dead," he said. "You wished I was," she replied. And then she turned and walked away, vanishing back into the golden light without waiting to see if he followed. He did. Behind him, the bride exhaled slowly. Her eyes stayed fixed on the doorway long after both figures were gone. Not a tear in sight, just quiet devastation. Her father cursed and stormed out. The preacher shut his Bible. The town whispered, shifting in the pews, pretending to be shocked when most of them weren't. Outside, the wind blew harder. By nightfall, Driftwood Hollow was a town divided. Some called him a fool. Others called him cursed. A few said maybe he'd done the only honest thing a man like him could do. But in the back rooms and saloons, over cigars and sips of rye, the story took on weight. They spoke of the woman from the hills, how she'd saved him once years ago, when he was a broken scout bleeding out near the canyon rim. How he'd lived among her people, learned their language, even loved her for a time before war and betrayal had torn it all to shreds. Some said she cursed him when he left her. Others said she spared him. And the bride, well, she didn't leave town. Not that night. Not the next. She walked home alone, dress trailing in the dust, her eyes hard as flint. And she didn't cry. Just sat at the edge of her father's porch, watching the moon rise over the prairie, fingers idly picking at the lace of her ruined gown. Some say she whispered something then, a name, a vow, a warning. No one knows for sure. But by morning, a new wind stirred through Driftwood Hollow, cold and sharp, and it carried the scent of old fire and fresh regret. The trail east of Driftwood Hollow turned from packed earth to loose stone, then to nothing at all, just broken sagebrush and the long shadows of forgotten hills. He rode alone, reins slack, rifle slung across his back like a ghost he couldn't outrun. The mare beneath him was tired, same as he was, but neither complained. Some roads weren't meant to be easy. The sun bore down like judgment. The air tasted of copper and distant smoke. Every mile took him farther from town gossip and deeper into land that remembered him differently, if it remembered him at all. He hadn't slept much since the wedding that wasn't. Nights were full of faces. Her face at the altar, her father's glare, and the other woman's eyes in the doorway. They stared at him in his dreams, each demanding something different. Forgiveness, vengeance, truth. He crested a ridge where the wind moved strange, whispering through the rocks like it had something to say. Below lay the remains of an old Comanche hunting camp. Just broken posts now, half-buried fire pits and sun-bleached bones. Once years back, he'd shared stew with a woman here, shared fire, laughter, silence. Before the war came and burned everything good. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching in the dust. His hand brushed the leather pouch at his belt, worn thin by habit. Inside it, a single eagle feather. He hadn't looked at it in years. That night returned to him in pieces. A storm rolling in, blood on his shirt, her hands on his chest, wrapping herbs in silence, eyes focused but full of warning. She had saved him, yes, but not gently. She had pulled the bullet like pulling a lie from flesh. And he had bled truth. They had been two people then, not yet ruined by the world. Young enough to believe in second chances. He built a fire that night near the same ruined stones, though there was no shelter. The stars flickered through thin cloud and smoke. Coyotes called in the distance, sharp as cracked glass. He stared into the flames until they blurred. A rustle broke the silence. He reached for his rifle. But it was no threat, just a boy, no older than 10, watching him from behind a cluster of thorn brush. The boy didn't speak. Half Apache by the look of him. Eyes too old for his face. He wore a rawhide vest and carried a sling. They stared at each other. Neither blinked. Then the boy nodded, once, and vanished back into the night. He didn't sleep. By morning, the fire had burned down, and the wind had changed. He rode east again, toward the White Mesa Ridge, where the land split like an old wound. The deeper he rode, the quieter the world became. He found the trading post 3 days later, nestled in a rock shelf, built from mud brick and old ambition. It smelled of coffee, bare fat, and desperation. Behind the counter sat a man with a face like sun-cracked leather and one good eye. "You've aged poorly," the man said without looking up. "You were already old last time I saw you." The trader chuckled. "I hear you made a mess of a wedding." "I didn't come for advice." "No," the man said, pouring 2 cups of bitter coffee. "You came looking for her." He didn't answer. "She's not the girl you remember," the trader said, sliding the cup forward. "Ain't been for years. Lives off the grid now. Doesn't trust anyone who wears boots too clean, or a heart too proud." "I'm not proud," he said, staring into the dark swirl of the cup. "No," the trader agreed. "Just guilty." They sat for a time in silence. The trader smoked. He drank. Outside, the wind pushed against the shutters like a child wanting in. "There's talk she rides with outcasts now," the trader continued. "Folks neither tribe nor town will claim. Ex-scouts. Widows. The lost ones. They've carved out a place down by Dustwater Hollow. Harsh land. No mercy. Sounds familiar." The trader's gaze sharpened. "What are you hoping to find out there?" He didn't know how to answer. He wanted to see her, yes. But not just to say, sorry. He wanted something deeper, something real, to look her in the eyes and let her see the man he became after she left her mark on him. Maybe to ask forgiveness. Maybe to ask if it was ever hers to give. "You buried something back then," the trader said softly, almost kindly. "But bones don't stay buried long out here." Later, he rode hard. He didn't stop to eat. The trail grew narrower, until it was more scar than path. On the 4th evening, he reached the tree. It stood alone on the edge of a ridge, an aspen, stunted and crooked, leaves sparse. At its base, a small bundle of dried flowers rested, fresh enough to say someone still remembered. He dropped to one knee. Not to pray, he didn't know how to do that anymore, but to listen. The wind moved through the branches with a sigh. He didn't need a grave marker to know what lay here. His throat tightened. They'd had a child once. He hadn't known. She never told him, not until after the war, after everything had collapsed. By then, the child was already gone. Fever, she'd said. Buried up here where the world could weep over it. He pressed a hand to the earth. It was cold, but not cruel. And for the first time in years, he felt something shift inside. A weight he hadn't known how to name. Regret, rage, love, all tangled. Behind him, hooves crunched softly in the dust. He rose slowly. She sat her horse like she was born to it, bow strapped to her back, her hair wind-whipped and wild. Her eyes locked onto his. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "I had to." "No," she replied. "You wanted to. That's different." The silence between them was full of ghosts. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. What words could hold what he needed to say? She dismounted without looking at him and walked to the tree, placed another flower on the earth, knelt there, hand resting on the soil like a mother's touch. He watched her. She didn't weep. Neither did he. But when she rose and looked at him, something passed between them, an old pain neither could bury again. And something else too. A question not yet spoken. She turned and walked away, deeper into the canyons beyond. This time, he followed at a distance. No promises. No demands. Just a man trying not to run anymore. The wind had teeth that day, dry and sharp, scraping across the plains like it meant to strip the land clean. He rode through it with his hat low, collar turned up, the horizon ahead a shimmer of heat and hunger. Behind him, the trail vanished with every gust, no tracks, no proof. That was fine. He wasn't trying to be followed. Dustwater Hollow wasn't a place you found unless someone wanted you to. Carved deep between fractured mesas, it was more secret than settlement, held together by lean-tos, rusted tools, and the stubborn will of those unwanted elsewhere. Smoke curled from cook fires. Children darted barefoot through the brush. Old women with rifles kept watch from the ridgelines like carved statues. Every face turned when he rode in. She was there waiting. No ceremony. No greeting. Just that stillness she wore like armor, her eyes two chips of flint watching for sparks. "You don't belong here," she said. "I never did," he answered. She looked older now, not in years, but in weight. Her shoulders carried more than her frame should allow. Every word she didn't say hung between them like broken branches. A man stepped forward from the shade, broad-shouldered and dark-eyed. He didn't introduce himself, just stood too close and looked ready to kill. "He followed me," she said, not taking her eyes off the rider. "But he's not here to stay." The man studied him. "What is he here for?" "To ask," she said. The man spat in the dirt and walked away. She led him past the tents, the cook fires, the carved-out life she'd built in the canyon's ribs. It wasn't a home, exactly, but it was hers. Every plank and post said survival. The people here watched him like prey they hadn't decided on yet. "Why now?" she asked as they walked. He didn't answer right away. A child tugged at her skirt, asking something in a language he only half understood. She bent low, whispered back, and kissed the top of the child's head before sending them off. Watching it, he felt something in his chest ache. "I thought if I saw you," he said, "I'd find some kind of answer." "Answers don't change the past," she said. "Only how much it hurts." They came to a half-built shelter near the back wall of the canyon. Tools lay scattered. A pile of timber leaned against a stone. "Help or leave," she said. He picked up a hammer without speaking. They worked until the sun dragged low. Her people watched, waiting to see if he'd run when it got hard. He didn't. He hammered, lifted, braced, sweated. Not to prove anything, just to move his hands when words wouldn't do. When dusk came, she handed him a cup of bitter coffee and sat across the fire from him. The heat painted her face in flickers, turning her scars to stories. "There was a day," she said, "when I prayed you'd come back. When I wanted to believe you'd come riding over the ridge with some good reason for why you left." "I didn't have one," he said. "Just fear." "You were good at running," she said. "Even better at convincing yourself it was something noble." The fire popped. Do you hate me? He asked. No, she said. That would mean I still cared enough to burn. What I feel now is colder. He nodded. She sipped her coffee, then looked up. But I do remember who you were before the uniform, before the orders, before the lies. That version of you deserved to live. I just don't know if he's still in there. He didn't know either. The next morning brought smoke, not from cook fires, but from the hills. One of the boys, a wiry teen with a bandaged arm, sprinted into camp, yelling something low and fast. She stood instantly. Scouts saw riders, half a dozen, armed, coming fast. He rose too. Yours. She shook her head. Yours. He knew what that meant. The bride's kin. Ranchers with pride like powder kegs. Men who'd watched their sister humiliated in front of God and everyone. They'd waited long enough. Now they were coming to settle things with bullets. This isn't their fight, he said. To them it is, she replied. She called the camp to readiness, fast but calm. Rifles handed out. Children moved into the caves. Women posted along the ridges. These people weren't soldiers, but they'd fought enough to know how to hold a line. He checked his rifle. Hands steady. Heart not so much. I'll ride out, he said. Try to stop it before it starts. You think they'll listen? No, he said. But they know my face. Maybe they'll aim for that instead of yours. She looked at him a long time. Something passed through her eyes. Anger, maybe, or something older. Then she nodded once. He rode out before the sun fully rose. Met them in the basin, where the earth was cracked and dry, wind tearing at the brush like it had something to prove. There were 7 of them. The bride's brothers in the center, all long limbs and mean eyes, with guns resting easy on their hips. Well, look what crawled out of shame, said the oldest. I came to talk. You came to hide behind squaws and bastards, the second snapped. He said nothing. The third brother spat. She cried for 3 nights after you left. You don't get to ride off and then ride back like it don't matter. It does matter, he said. That's why I'm here. You shamed her. I shamed myself. Same thing. The brothers closed ranks, hands drifting to their holsters. He didn't reach for his gun. He just said one word. Please. They stared at him, unsure what to do with that. Then the youngest, barely more than a boy, raised his pistol. The rider's hand hovered, but didn't draw. Wind kicked up. Tension bristled, thick as thunder. And just before the shot could be fired, a single arrow landed in the dirt between them, quivering. They turned. She stood on the ridge above, bow drawn again, face unreadable. You shoot him, she called down, and I burn your name off this land. 1 bullet. That's all it takes to start a war you can't finish. The youngest faltered. The eldest looked between them, fury darkening his face. But he turned his horse slowly. This isn't done, he said. Not by a long damn shot. They rode off. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. When he turned, she was already gone, vanished like wind through canyon stone. But in the dirt beside the arrow was something he hadn't expected. A single feather, black with a streak of white. The same kind he'd carried once. He picked it up with reverence. Then mounted up and rode back, knowing this wasn't over. But maybe, just maybe, the road wasn't closed anymore. The dust came first, curling over the canyon's edge in slow spirals, like breath held too long. Then came the hooves, distant but steady, each beat thudding like a warning through the cracked earth. The camp stirred in silence. No one ran. They just stood still, back straight, eyes narrowed. The wind carried the scent of sweat, horses, and gun oil. War had arrived. He stood at the edge of the ridge, with his rifle resting across his chest. The land below rolled out wide and dry, lit by a morning sun too bright for the things about to happen. Across the flats, riders emerged one by one, 7, maybe more, faces hard beneath brims, rifles glinting in the light. The bride's brothers at the front, their formation tight, their intent loud, without words. She walked up beside him, bow slung across her back, her expression unreadable. You were right, he said. They didn't come to talk. They never do. The children were already hidden in the caves. The older ones carried buckets to the well and hauled water to the rooftops, just in case fire followed bullets. A few of the men sharpened knives they'd likely never throw. The camp was a breath away from breaking, but no one would show fear. Not here. He looked at her. She met his gaze with the same quiet steel she'd worn the first day he saw her across enemy lines, a lifetime ago. "Let me go down," he said. She shook her head. "You'll die. Better that than letting them burn this place. You think your death buys back what you broke?" "No," he said. "But maybe it buys something else." She didn't stop him. Didn't say goodbye. Just handed him a knife and turned away. He walked into the dust. At the foot of the hill, the riders pulled up short. They hadn't expected him to meet them in the open. The eldest brother leaned forward in the saddle, eyes shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "You really think you're worth dying for?" he called out. He said nothing. The second brother spit. "This ain't even about you anymore. She drew on us. That camp's sheltering criminals. You don't get to hide behind women and call it justice. You came here looking for blood," he said. "But you won't get it unless you spill mine first." The eldest snorted. "You really think you dying makes any difference?" "I think it's the only thing I got left to give." A silence followed. Heavy. Staring down death, even the loudest men quiet. Then a voice rang out behind him. "If he dies, he doesn't die alone." She stood at the ridge with half the camp behind her. Men, women, even the older children, bows drawn, rifles loaded, eyes steady. And then another sound. Hooves again, but from the south. Another figure appeared on the horizon, slow and alone. A woman in a torn wedding dress, her veil gone, hair whipping in the wind. The bride. The riders turned to her, confusion rippling through the formation. She didn't stop riding until she reached them, and even then, she didn't speak at first. Just dismounted, dusted her skirt, and looked at her brothers like strangers. "Go home," she said. "This ain't your call," one snapped. "It is," she said. "You're not here for honor. You're here because you didn't know what to do with your shame. You don't know what he did. I know exactly what he did. I know what he didn't do, too. But I also know burning down a camp full of orphans and widows won't give you your pride back." The youngest looked away. "You think killing him makes you strong?" she asked. "Then go ahead. Kill him. But it won't fix the silence in your own hearts. And it won't change what I've already let go." The eldest sneered. "He broke you." She stepped closer. "No. You did. When you made this about you. When you turned a man's mistake into an excuse to ruin lives." He stood quietly, watching her. This woman he had wronged, who had every reason to turn away, now standing between war and peace with nothing but truth. One by one, the riders backed their horses away. Some turned. Others lingered, uncertain. Then the eldest brother nodded once, cold and slow. "Next time, you won't have someone speaking for you." "I won't need one," she said. They left with the wind behind them, angry but retreating. He stood there in the dust, heart thudding in his chest like a war drum waiting for a song. She approached him slowly, the torn dress trailing like a flag. "I didn't come for you," she said. "I came for me. I know. I loved who you were. Hated what you became. But maybe that hate burned itself out. I never asked you to forgive me." "No," she said. "But I did." He looked at her, the ache in his chest shifting into something quieter. And from the ridge, the other woman watched. No jealousy, no rage, just understanding. She turned and walked back toward her people. He followed her up the path, step by step, his shoulders lighter than they had been in years. When he reached the tree again, the crooked aspen overlooking the valley, he knelt and buried the feather beneath a stone. A mark of the man he used to be, and the one he was trying to become. The wind turned softer. The camp returned to its rhythm, and the fire in the distance smoldered out. He stayed. Not as a hero. Not as a lover returned. Just a man rebuilding, one honest deed at a time.